Good morning, good afternoon. Hope everybody's doing great today. My name is Tri Nguyen. I am one of the product managers here at ZYXEL. Welcome to ZYXEL Tech Talk. We want to run these pretty much kind of on a Tuesday at around this time at 11 p.m. Pacific. It's pretty much about having a quick, informative, interactive time with partners, with prospective customers and things like that, people who want to find out more about ZYXEL. So we're going to have a quick introduction about who ZYXEL is. We'll have a topic of discussion. Today, we'll be talking about the Advanced Threat Protection Appliance. And then we're going to open it up for any questions. Of course, you can always ask questions throughout the entire, the whole presentation. We have some additional sections later on, in the coming weeks. Today's part one of the Advanced Threat Protection. So if you'd like to come back for that part two of it, please do sign up for that. And then on the 22nd, we're talking about wireless, so 101, and then covering Nebula on the 24th. And again, we wanted it to be informative. So again, use the Q&A section or the chat box. But if you can put in the Q&A, that'd be greatly appreciated. We'll have it also recorded as well, so you'll be able to see this as well. And today, I think we're on Facebook Live as well, if you're following us on Facebook. So hello to you all. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook as well. So let's just jump right on in. We got a bunch of slides that we want to be able to cover. Again, I've been in the networking industry for 15 years at ZYXEL, and with a total about over 20 years of networking experience just working in the industry. So I'm based out of Anaheim, California, and our company, we just celebrated our 30th anniversary. 30 years of networking expertise. We were established in 1989. So we've been a company that's been around for quite a long time. Our headquarters is in Taiwan. Our North American headquarters is in Anaheim, California. So that's where I'm based out of. We have over 700,000 businesses that actually use ZYXEL products to empower their businesses. We have 1,500 employees worldwide, serving over 150 global markets, 100 million devices creating global connections using all sorts of technologies. ZYXEL offers a comprehensive portfolio of products, security appliances, wireless, Ethernet, LAN, wired connectivity, gateways for hospitality, and then all encompassed into a networking management solution, whether it be in the cloud or in standalone. So we give pretty much everything, all under the sun. I usually tell all my customers and my partners that ZYXEL offers a product that connects you to any kind of network. So anything you can connect to a network, ZYXEL has a product that will fulfill that. So today I wanted to talk and kind of dive a little bit deeper. I know we already did some announcements before, and we did some trainings on just the advanced threat protection from a high level. So this session is kind of digging in a little bit deeper about the technology on the sandboxing, on the cloud query, and can give you a background on why that's important and how we're kind of doing these things and how that actually helps to protect networking networks today, and how that's a little bit different from UTM that you might be used to right now. So maybe by a show of hands, how many of you already are deploying UTM products right now, using either ZYXEL or someone else's product? All right, great. Thank you, Michael, Matthew, Stuart. All right, yeah, quite a few of you. I mean, obviously, it's a necessity, right? Every network connected, whether you be a small business, 1 to 2 employees, all the way up to the enterprise, you're connected to the same exact internet. You're facing the same kind of zombie threats, malware, all those kinds of things that the internet has out there. So protecting it, whether you be big or small, is very important thing. And I think most of the time people just neglect that fact, and they just say, well, that's not going to happen to me. But that's typically the kind of the wrong mindset. And I think as partners, as manufacturers, as people who have a passion to protect networks, like myself, we want to make sure that everybody's informed and educated. So you as a partner being able to communicate the need, not only to buy the product itself, but just an overall concern and need for those kinds of protections. So the advanced threat protection in the ATP is quite extensive. What it offers is a few things. Not only will it do your typical UTM product protection that you're used to now, but also all of the some additional functions as well. So it provides high performance throughput. So the ATP series can perform up to 2.5 times better than the USG series that you might be using today. So that allows for, especially when internet connectivities now are expanding quite quickly. You may have customers who just purchased, a high-speed cable modem service or fiber service to their office that is exceeding, several hundred megabits per second, where their current existing firewall cannot, fulfill that need. It's now become the bottleneck. When they do their tests, they'll see that, hey, their speeds are lower than what they purchased. And so that's going to be the typical case that you're going to run into these days. And that's what we actually get a lot of phone calls about. Because, of course, the older generation product was made to handle up to a certain speed, right, into a certain subset. And so now it's exceeding that. So we, of course, we have to then migrate. And so we have trade-in programs, trade-up programs for partners and customers to be able to get to the newer technology. So be able to offer high-performance functionality without having to sacrifice security, right? The whole solution is all about setting up security, and to tell a customer, well, just turn off some of your antivirus or turn off your intrusion detection scanning, which is the most intensive part of the UTM platform, the applications. Then it's kind of like a pointless firewall box, like, right? You could still just do SPI firewall, but it's not protecting against the malware and things like that. So it's not a valid solution. Maybe it's a temporary, just to get them to the speeds they need for the time being. But ultimately, they're going to need to move to a higher performance box. Using the ATP for sandboxing, leveraging sandboxing AI technologies to identify unknown threats. So being able to see those kinds of things and find out what are these new applications, these documents that might be out there that is showing up and popping up, being able to send that off for analysis. That's what the sandbox does in kind of a safe AI kind of a way in a sandbox in the cloud. Combined with a wireless LAN controller, now you have the ability to control and analyze and protect even wireless connectivity. So using the AP controller function all built into the box, being able to manage multiple access points that are used by the ZYXEL access points in that network, being able to manage, monitor, control, provision, and everything like that inside the same box. Being able to do it with high availability. So in our higher end models, being able to have multiple devices, doing the load balancing and failover scenarios. So your security is always on, being able to do that. Having enhanced UTM, more enhanced than the traditional UTM. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the second session next week on Tuesday, as well as the botnet filter as well. Those are some of the nitty-gritty kind of features that are making it different on the ATP series versus your typical UTM, right? So UTM, by definition, when I talk about UTM, it's kind of all unified threat management. That's what it stands for. In the traditional USG, it's content filtering, intrusion detection, application control, anti-spam, antivirus, right? So those are the kind of the baseline malware protection that you get with UTM. Now, of course, on top of that, this ATP provides a lot more. So again, come back next week and we will talk more in depth about that as well. But we'll hit a little bit high level here. And again, if you have any questions regarding that, we can talk more. So taking a look at the dashboard of the ATP includes all the general information, also some threat analysis information, the latest logs, statistics, system status, resource usage, things like that. The advanced threat protection page really shows the different kind of threats that are there. And also if there's something like, we'll find out like app patrol information or links to the different options, things like that. So this is kind of your first view when you log into an ATP and to get kind of the information that's there. So there's a lot of useful information. I think some of these, this information on the dashboard are little widgets as well. So you can move them around to see what is fit and choose what fits your need to manage and monitor these devices. Of course, this is what happens when you log into the device itself. Now, just to let you know, just disclaimer, that we will have the ATP series be manageable into our Nebula cloud in the near future. So you'll be able to kind of get a holistic view of it through just one cloud portal in the future. Now, of course, we have some other management options that you can use, but this is what the view is when you first log on. So it gives you all that information on the left side there, including all the threats. And then, of course, the logs that are available, any alerts, things like that shows up here as well. So in this side of things, there's a lot of data in the advanced threat protection tab. You'll find pretty much all the functions. The botnet filters how many connections were scanned, sandboxing files that were scanned, shows you the anti-malware, the IDP, things of that sort. Now, of course, if you have no UTM services turned on, which doesn't make sense if you buy the ATP, because that is what the ATP does. It's about unified threat management. But if you don't have anything turned on, then all the scan traffic would be pretty much non-existent. But because there is, you'll use these, or you'll see that there's a lot of useful information. Now, we do have a software that's called Secu Manager, which I'll talk about again next week, that kind of takes multiple devices and puts it into a cloud solution and puts it into a nice reporting view for you, so that you could use that as PDF reports to your customer to show this kind of information, right? How many files were blocked, anti-malware, things like that, content filtering, sites that had been scanned, things like that. Very useful information that really then add value to the solution that you're offering to your customer, whether you're charging a monthly fee or you're just having them renew every year, right? It just depends on your business model. We have customers that do it each way. So if you have any questions on which one may work best for you, let us know. Talk to us, talk to our sales team about that. But really, this provides a good holistic view. You could even just take this, as a cut and paste if you want, screenshot that you provide into a monthly report to your customer. And I would advise for that, because again, it just shows the usefulness of the product. Because again, most of the time, all these threats are being blocked in the background, and nobody even knows that it even is happening. Even maybe the IT person doesn't even check it, only when there is usually a problem, right? That's when we usually check these kinds of things. But it's really nice to have that available. You can even have it so that your customer could lock into the product as well, and take a look at it as well. It depends on how you give them access. So it gives you kind of, again, an overview of everything that's there. So the question is, why do we even need advanced threat protection? So the traditional UTM kind of works in this regard. It uses definitions and signatures and known things, right? That has to be patched. Those signatures have to be added into kind of a database that gets updated so often, right? It's just like your antivirus, right? It gets updated, the virus, or first the virus is unknown. You find like traces of it, you see the file, you then analyze it, you can hash it out and say, okay, this is the signature that identifies that is that virus, right? So you need to know all of that in order to protect against it. So anti-spam, the intrusion detection, the antivirus, any application control, content filtering, things like that. Those are all, things that you need to know about. Now, Stuart asked the question, what functions are included with the ATP and what ones are additional license charge functions? So the ATP comes when you buy it, 1 year bundle to all the services. There's only one license you can buy. It's all or nothing. So because it is the advanced threat protection appliance, it's as one, just one license. So you only have one option to buy. It unlocks everything, including the the AP controller functions. So basically, it's a completely unlocked box. There's nothing else you would need to buy after that. So I'll talk about the licensing at the end as well, but that's what it includes. It includes quite a bit, not just this typical UTM that you see here, but with the UTM definitions, you can identify them and know that, okay, well, these are known good. These are good kind of this kind of traffic or behavior. And then, of course, you can then have the very suspicious stuff or the bad stuff, right? So you know that those are what we need to block. So you have those two sides, and it's kind of a clear definition. But the problem with UTM is not necessarily the clear part; it's the unclear part. It's the stuff in between. It could be good, it could be bad, and identifying it's very difficult for a signature. And that's where you kind of get false positives, and traffic, or even just the usability just becomes bad if you have it turned up too high per se, or if you're too sensitive to that. So we do give options to be able to untick certain behaviors, so that it depending on your application, depending on that customer's usage, whether or not it's more strict or not. So you can do that, but that's where the ATP kind of comes into play. You can use sandboxing and AI to manage that. So we're going beyond kind of the conventional way of using unified threat management. Of course, again, like I mentioned, being able to identify now unknown things, because with traditional UTM, you have to use signatures, heuristics, or reputation, things like that. And so ATP goes beyond that. It uses AI to protect against that in the cloud, to protect against zero-day attacks. Pretty much if it's not identified or it's not known, it's going to be sent to the cloud. So let's see how that actually works. So we're actually able to conquer unknown security threats. So zero-day threats are actually make up probably a majority of the threats that are out there, right? When a company is being either targeted or attacked, they're not going to just send out a virus that is known or a malware that is known to that company, because most likely, more likely than not, that company has some sort of a defense mechanism, defense system that already recognizes it as a threat and will block it, right? So a lot of these exploits and things like that, they're trying to find new ways to get in, to go undetected. So they're unknown. So you have to do something, a lot different from that. So ATP can block suspicious traffic while still maintaining real high speeds. And so it maintains a great experience for the user. And then of course, unknown files are then isolated using sandboxing for analysis. So let's deep dive a little bit into the sandboxing function of the ZYXEL ATP series, and how it protects unidentified threats. So this is how it typically works. What the ATP does is when there's a file being transferred, or again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a file itself. It could be a behavior or something. The ATP device will look up within its local database. So it has local signatures, a local hash table of known things. So there's a set number within the device itself. It will then query into the cloud to find out if it doesn't have that information, or it syncs up with the cloud to get maybe the latest information on the database. Now, of course, it will also send the information, if it's an unknown file, out to the sandboxing side. So we'll sandbox it into the cloud. So if it's not known, then the hash is sent to the cloud query, and the response actually happens very quickly. And then again, if it's not found or it's not known by the cloud query, then it's sent to the sandbox. So then what happens is the file gets sent to that cloud. The cloud then contains it. It checks its, the packets pattern in the sandbox. It executes and analyzes it in a safe sandbox virtual environment to see what kind of content it is. It could be a zip file. It could be like a Google Doc, not a Google Doc, it could be like a Word doc, an Excel file, things like that. And then it analyzes its behavior, because there's a lot of times when you open up certain files, maybe a connection is trying to be made, or some unknown to an unknown IP address, or to, out of the country, things like that, that might be abnormal behavior. It's analyzed and then documented. That information can be identified. Okay, this is malicious activity, in which then it actually creates an information hash per se, and sent off for to the defense intelligence side. It creates an update, so it basically puts a new signature into the database. Not only then is it queried, or it's in the cloud query, and then of course it's synced up with the local device as well. So you can imagine kind of how the flow goes here. This what to do. And so kind of the average time could be a few minutes per se. So during that meantime, of course, then it could be that you have settings where that file will just get blocked for the time being until it's unknown. And then of course the behavior is then to wait a little while and then maybe resend the file or whatever it is. But once it's identified as good, then of course every instance of that is fine. So it depends on the file. So best case, it could just take a few seconds to do that, but it reports it back. The sandbox also creates the hash and sends it to the security cloud side. And then of course, all that is can be shared as well. So it creates that. So how do you configure that inside the device itself? If you go to your configurations and you go to the sandboxing section of the network configurations, there's an enable in the sandboxing tab, enable sandboxing. So you just have to enable that with the checkbox. You can then choose actions for what to do. Destroy the file when it's found, log it, yes or no. If it's a suspicious file, do you want to just destroy it? Again, it depends on how strict you want your offering or your service is. So it will check, zip files, executables, Office documents, even media, Flash data, PDFs, RTFs, things like that. All those files are going to be checked in the sandbox. And then, of course, you can then log it. You get a summary of the information, the statistics, if you like, how it gets reported, and also the scan results of that summary. So you can look at that information. And of course, you can log it, and it will show the different logs. Now, this could all be sent into a syslog server. So if you're either using a log service, or again, if you're using ZYXEL secure report, these logs will go into that cloud service for you to digest and analyze from there as well. All right, so that's how it kind of works in that portion of it for the sandboxing. So that sandboxing is really, again, a safe place where unknown files are getting executed and analyzed, and then signatures are being made. Now, Cloud Query, that Cloud Query portion of it is an important part of this whole kind of system, right? Again, if the file is not known by the local database, it goes and checks to the Cloud Query, or goes to the Cloud Query. And of course, that Cloud Query is also synced on a daily basis to make sure that the local database has the latest threats or whatever may be defined as the latest information. And of course, it's also synced with third-party vendors information as well on latest threats. And of course, if the sandbox creates a new hash, it goes to the Cloud Query portion. And globally, all the hashes globally are networked together as well. So the hash is created and goes into that query cloud. So that means that throughout the entire ATP database or product portfolio, and all the devices that are being deployed, they're all sending this hash data information, through the different sandboxes to the ZYXEL Cloud Query, and that becomes kind of the master brain of the whole system. Meaning that any ATP device, even is protected against whatever a malicious file is found, on the other side of the world, right? So that's the whole idea of kind of a group learning and an AI cloud learning. That's kind of the benefit of that. So the Cloud Query kind of controls that. So let's say, for example, here, and we're just using Europe here for an example, ATP sees an unknown file, sends it to the sandbox for analysis. And of course, then in Norway, there's some other information, finds out that file as well. And then if that information is then shared, the query name has been analyzed, and you get a reply from the cloud since the file's already been analyzed. So even, across the way, however far away you want it be the file, if that happens to be the file, the malicious file, it will then be stored. Now, Chad had a question: is there a maximum size we can analyze in Sandbox? Will this work with the 1 gig ISO file? I'll have to check with our R&D team to see what the max limitations are. I do not think an ISO file currently is being analyzed if it's on that list or not, because it's not necessarily an executable. But you could use other analysis, like if there's malware, you could also choose that ISO files cannot be sent across as well. So you can use other means to block it rather than trying to analyze like a install image like that. So, but I will check with our support team. So now it provides obviously a global security ecosystem. So they all work together. So the more ATP devices that we deploy, the more eyes or the more visibility of the network it shows, right? Now, again, it's not just ZYXEL boxes that are providing this. We also still, again, have third-party vendors who provide us the signatures and provide us the analysis and all sorts of other threats on top of the sandboxing as well. So they will also have different hash files, signatures, heuristics, behaviors, and things like that that get put into that Cloud Query, right? So it's not just a ZYXEL deployment of devices that are collecting this data. It's using every possible way that we have, to our disposal to get that information into the Cloud Query. Again, make it as strong as possible in terms of defense. And over time, that continues to grow, right? As the database continues. And of course, the sandboxing just gives you that ultimate flexibility. No matter what kind of file or no matter what kind of malware eventually comes out, it will get analyzed. Now, there is one drawback, right? There is always a patient zero, in any kind of thing. Somebody gets infected. So the first person who does pass it through, if that does get through, unfortunately, it does get through. But after that point, any instance of that could be protected against, right? Because or you can just choose to just say, well, those kind of files, if they are potentially malicious, potentially get blocked. But what we found is that that does provide sometimes a false positive, which then kind of really could hamper like the user experience, because it could just be a regular Word doc that they're trying to send off, no malicious involved, but because it is new, then it's being analyzed in the sandbox anyways. But again, some of those files happen very quickly. So again, the user experience could be very negligible, or there's nothing to worry about in that point. But of course, it's that balance between protection, ultimate protection, which is just turn off the internet, right? But that's not practical. So we got to have a balance of protection and not. But at least though, any new threats that are out there, they can be opened and things like that. Since these files are sent to the cloud, open. So it's not necessarily, there's some other details that are involved to it, but all of our solutions follow GDPR. So all of the privacy issues that even dealt with in Europe and things like that, these are all kosher to that. So the HIPAA compliance portion of it, I will check to see, but from my understanding that there isn't any issues with that, because it's just being analyzed in the AI. But again, I don't know what the definition of HIPAA would have against it. So I know it's all about the privacy of the user database. So of course, I think we protect it somehow. So I think it's one of those where it doesn't know the origins or the file or who it is. But again, I will check with our support team. So as a global security system here, again, it all works together. So the daily, again, it syncs together with a local database. It, again, detects new threats on any active ATP, like I mentioned before, and the hash is sent. So a lot of the data that is being executed, or at least sent or shared amongst the other firewalls, they're just hash information. So it just is to identify the file itself, and the AI is kind of its own kind of closed system there. So the devices are being protected globally. Anything that's connected globally will share that information to that cloud query. All right, so any new threats will also be continued updated, like I mentioned, by our third parties. So the old traditional UTM, you can see, is very more simplistic. We just depend upon the third-party vendors who just provide us the different signatures, the different behaviors. And a lot of times those are either monthly or weekly updates that could come from them. Depends on the partner, depends on what it is. Usually malware or antivirus stuff comes a lot quicker. And it could be updated, on the hour per se. So you can always have the latest threats against those signatures. But again, they have to be known. So the third-party vendor has to already have identified and seen the threat, seen the virus, seen the malware, created a signature against it, and provided for us. And so we then put it into our local database. And of course, the local database is limited as well, right? Because it is limited by memory. You can only store so many. So it only protects against the latest threats provided by those third-party vendors. So again, they're doing their job in terms of finding the latest threats so that we don't have to worry about it. And they provide that to us, and we just utilize it. So sometimes it will change kind of the priority, but again, we're still talking about 600,000, of the top known viruses or malware, things like that. So it's still protecting about, quite a lot of them, at least the ones that are most widespread, or the ones that are spreading or have been seen, to be spreading throughout the world. So that information is still provided to us in the ATP ecosystem, right? The third-party information that you see in the traditional UTM is still being provided, but this time it's being provided to the cloud query, which then syncs up to the local database as necessary or as needed. So again, it's much more powerful because we're not just using those third-party vendors. Now we're using the hash from the sandbox, also from other devices that are out there in the world as well. So a lot more eyes, a lot more ability to block those kinds of threats. So the ATP is, a series of hardware platforms. We are releasing, just to let you know, at the end of this month. I know some of you maybe have already talked to our sales team and they're super excited about it. Before, we only had an ATP 200, a 500, and an 800 series that was released. And of course, they're all scaled depending on what you need. You can see that UTM throughput of the ATP 200 is 450 megabits per second. So real life throughput, you probably can quote out up to 300 megabits per second on that UC200. I usually take about 50 to 65%. But in fact, actually, in tests that our customers have done, the numbers exceeded that. Doing their normal speed test. We just say that as a conservative number because it depends on how you've configured the device with the UTM, like how many different connections you're actually scanning it through per se, or different interfaces that you're scanning, which can impact the throughput of the product, obviously. Because if you're scanning upstream, downstream, on LAN 1 to LAN 2, LAN 1 to WAN, to WAN to LAN, right? So if you're doing too many scans, you're double scanning a lot of times of the traffic potentially. So there are some best practices that you could use. Typically though, whatever's kind of in that default setup, working with our tech support, you should be able to find the most optimal. And once you have that cookie cutter information, then you could use it for pretty much everything there. But we are releasing an ATP 100, so it's a little step down in terms of a performance, but it gives you a better price point. So it now fills out our portfolio where you're talking about 250 megabits per second. So customers who have anywhere between 100, 150 megabits per second connectivity, that's perfect for that size office to still do full UTM, full sandboxing, all of the security. And all of the products here include 1-year gold security pack. It's the only option that you have. When you buy it, it comes with it. And if you look at the pricing, you'll see it's very competitive. Of course, a lot of the competitors right now don't have this kind of performance. So if you want to compare performance, these will blow most of the competitors away, right? Unless you're having to go with a higher end box. Can you explain VPN throughput? Does the spec mean per VPN? No, well, it's the overall. So the throughput, like VPN, when you build a VPN tunnel, the encryption that's being used, if you have 100 people, then they're going to share that 300 megs, right? So each one, if they were all sending traffic at the same time, it would get 3 megs each. But the problem is, the good thing is that not everybody is doing a file transfer the entire time, 24/7. It's very bursty, right? If you're using it to grab a file, it'll grab a file. It'll use the pipe as much as it can to grab the file. And even in worst case scenario here with VPN throughput, you're looking at about 150, to 200 megs of VPN throughput. You can pull that file, probably very quickly, and then it's done, right? There's a lot of idle time when you look at it from a networking standpoint. Most of the time, the bandwidth is doing nothing because you're just doing something very quickly in a burst, and then it's done. It's open. So you'll have to divide the number of sessions or the number of connections, VPN connections, with that. But even if you look at a VPN tunnel monitoring now, you'll see that it's only using probably a couple megs at a time, like just bursting. And it depends on what's on the other side, right, as well. So in the other office, it's kind of subject to the upload speed, which is usually the lower speed. If you don't have a synchronous connectivity, you're at the lowest common speed, right, or the lowest common denominator type, where that if that side only has a 50 meg connection up, then you can only download at 50 megs anyways on that VPN. So that's going to be the bigger challenge for you. But if you're managing, typically the VPN number is a lot higher than the UTM. The UTM is the most intensive. So if you quote out or if you kind of build out based on the UTM performance, then it's always going to be overperforming on that number with any other of the applications, because you can see the SPI firewall is quite high. But of course, when you're doing UTM, you're doing layer 7 scanning, and that's a normal thing that happens. You're just doing more. You're doing something more intense. You're looking much deeper into the packet. You're doing more things for malware, filtering, botnet filter, all those kinds of things in this engine that require CPU. So you have to then analyze it and do that. But all of the products come with the 1-year security pack. And again, it scales from anywhere between 250 megabits down there. Oh, and the ATP 100 will be available and start shipping in the November timeframe. Actually, it's going to be announced on the 24th that it's going to be available. Of course, there's some time that gets into distribution and things like that. But if you need something, if you need samples, things like that, to contact your sales rep to get your hands on it. If you haven't tried any of the ATPs, please do. You'll notice that it is much faster than and performing, especially when you turn on the UTMs, than any other product that's out there for us and for even the major competitors out there, unless you're going with a very high-end box. So just kind of give you a perspective, the ATP 100 with 1 year UTM, all fully loaded, all activated, 250 megabits of UTM throughput is going to run a street price around $399. So $399 for that box. And again, it has 1 year of service on that. ATP is about, I think, $600, I believe. And of course, it kind of scales up there depending on your performance needs there. Is there a modem compatibility list for the US USB? We do, but not in the US, Matthew. In the US, we have some issues with the current providers that are here in the US in allowing for us to use different types of the USB adapters, because the dongles themselves are modems and not just a 3G dongle anymore. And so the mechanism in order for it to activate is a lot different than what it used to be. So it hasn't been approved. So there's a lot of approval process that has not been gone through. But if you have a specific LTE, and that's kind of the problem in the US is right now as well, is a lot of the LTE, since we're not, we don't have our own LTE. In fact, actually we do have a 4G LTE like modems that we could potentially put on there, but they're not approved for the service providers that are here. So that's kind of the issue that we have. So we currently don't have. Now, we do have solutions where customers have just used a kind of an external USB modem device that has an Ethernet or Ethernet option that can be plugged into a WAN connection to provide the backup. Will we see the ATP range moving into Nebula? Yes, Alex. So that's that's the current plan, and you'll probably see that in the first quarter of next year to see the ATP series be managed within the Nebula platform. You'll see some other new things going on as well that give you the performance of the ATP, and then that's coming kind of middle of next year. So you'll see kind of a portfolio of that happening next year. Is there still a ZYXEL priority for VIP installs? I could, let's see, hold on. I could use a failover solution. So yeah, there is a prioritization within these ATPs. So you can use that for voice all the time. Be able to prioritize different traffics, different ITP ranges. You can create a lot of different policies that will recognize VoIP traffic to do that. So we have a lot of customers who actually use this product, use our security firewalls for years now to doing VoIP installs. What's the street price of the ATP 100? Seth, it is going to be $399, the street price. That's the current target street price for that. So of course, if you are a partner though, make sure you do become a partner, because that does give you, anywhere a great discount through distribution, so that you can make margin on top of that as well. So even if you sold it at that street price, you can manage that. What is the cost of the ATP subscription after the first year? It's about, I would say in general, it's about 60% of that price. So if this was $399, you'll probably see the renewal year package would be probably about 200, I think, between 200 to 250, something like that, for the ATP 100. So it would cost, a little bit less than the hardware plus the ATP. And let's see, the other question was, does the device have any functionality without the subscription? Yeah, of course, it still functions as a full, SPI firewall. So if you still are doing, port forwarding, you want to do just still SPI scanning, VPN connectivity, all that's all included in the box. You still need to have your DHCP, you still have your different interfaces to prioritize. The only thing that is paid is all on the licensing of the security UTM portion, right? So any of your malware analysis, the botnet filters, content filtering, intrusion detection, those things that are classified as UTM features, those are part of that license. So that's pretty much your options there. So a little bit about the license itself. So the gold security pack gives you sandboxing, the content filtering, botnet, application security, malware blocking, cloud query, information database, threat database, intrusion detection, GeoIP, which is the IP, it can detect IP address, based on the IP address, what country the traffic is coming from. So you can choose different countries to block, or you can say, well, You know, the VPN tunnels should only be built from a US connection. So you make an allow exception for those, right? So again, just to introduce that. Are there multi-year renewals? Yes, there will be multi-year renewals that you can stack. So there will be a 1 year and a 2 year pack. And then on top of that, you can still stack them as well. So if you have customers who want to have a longer contract, and that's what we'll see people do, is they'll have a longer term contract. And depending on your business model, they may just put a 3-year license onto that. It depends on how the customer's paid upfront, things like that. But we are working on some other ways too to allow for not only multi-year renewal, but even on a smaller scale. So coming in the near future, just so you know, as a partner of ours, we'll have the ability to offer potentially monthly or quarterly, half-year kind of options, right? So different auto renewal segments. Again, depends on your business model, and that would be super helpful for managed service providers who don't want to have to pay, you know, the upfront capital to invest in a year when their customers are paying month to month, right? And if you don't have like an install fee or anything like that to help cover you to bring your break-even point kind of lower, this is going to be super helpful, because then you only have to pay for either monthly and charge the customer monthly, which is instant profit, right? You're instantly making recurring revenue on the monthly, but probably less than, of course, than if you bought the whole year and kind of spread it out throughout the whole year, because then you would make more profit in that regard. But again, it helps for smaller MSPs or MSPs to want to expand very quickly without having to dump a bunch of capital into investing in the licenses of these products like right away. So there's going to be some interesting plans that will be available for that. How does cloud sandboxing assume compliance with GDRP? I will check with it, because our products are made specifically to handle that in GDRP. So all of the information protection, identification, things like that are being protected somehow. So I will check with them on the details, and I will probably provide that to the team to provide to you. Thank you for that question. Also, again, it includes the managed AP services and also Secu Reporter that I mentioned. And again, I'm going to talk more about Secu Reporter next week, because it's a little bit more of the different function there. So we'll jump into that. But the managed service APs, when you buy the gold pack, the APs as a controller, sorry, the device as a controller can control up to 10 APs on the ATP 100, 18 for the ATP 200, 34 on the 500, and 130 for the ATP 800. So again, pretty large deployments if you have that. Do I have a link to the Secure Reporter webinar? I'm going to be doing the webinar next week that includes Secu Reporter in it. So we'll talk about some of the features like botnet, content filtering, things like that, including Secure Reporter. So if you come back next week, Seth, we'll have that. We'll also have it recorded. So if you can't catch us next week, Seth, then we'll do that. You'll be able to get that link to see that portion of it. We did have a previous webinar that did talk about Secure Reporter as well in one of my other ATP or security webinars. So I can always help you find that later on. So the ATP versus USG, here's kind of the comparisons between them. So you'll see the USG has a lot of the app patrols, things like that, your typical UTM. And of course, ATP adds on a lot more layers of that, including the sandboxing. That's the most important, is botnet filter, sandboxing. And again, next week, I'll be covering the botnet portion and some more of the malware information of the product. And of course, the big differentiator between the USG and the ATP is the performance. The IDP and the UTM performance could be up to 2.5 times more than the previous generation. So if you're looking for high speed or want to be able to future-proof the connectivity, the security appliance, ATP is the way to go. It is the future. It's going to, basically the hardware platform will be what we move forward with. So Matthew had a question as well on ATP control. Does it automatically handle AP handoffs and different power levels for different APs? You can set that. So it can handle that from a 802.1x authentication, but the roaming portion of it, you can control. What you can control is the sensitivity of the power output. So if it detects a signal strength with the device being a certain threshold, the AP can kick the user off, so it hands it off basically better to the nearest AP in that coverage area. Again, typically most devices, they're the ones who decide who to connect to. And so the only thing that we can do on our side is to force them to kick off or to get off the weaker AP. So that's what we do, and you can control that within the AP controller function. Pretty much anything you can configure in the APs as a standalone mode in ZYXEL's APs, you can control within the cloud, within the manager or within the GUI of the USG and ATPs. The only thing, so just to let you know, the only major thing right now that is different that the USG has, which the ATP does not yet have, is hotspot management. So if you're looking to do a guest network hotspot, like for paid billing, things like that. Now, if you're looking for just, I need a terms of service, I need a splash page, I need a login page for a guest, you could still do that with the ATP. The only thing it's missing is that if you're trying to do billing with it, you're trying to do credit card processing for access or connect using Facebook Wi-Fi, things like that, that is only available right now in the USG. There are plans to be putting it into the ATP, of course. So we're waiting for that portion of it. Are there any filters to identify IoT protocols? I will have to check with our tech support. If you send me an email, Volker, to try@zyxel.com with any specific IoT protocols you're talking about, we can help to look that up. I will talk to my my support engineers to see if there's specific ones. But there is a lot of different kind of protocols, things like that, that it does analyze and know about. But sometimes it's just a lot of details that I don't necessarily know exactly. I have to look it up. And then lastly, if you are not currently a ZYXEL partner, I encourage you to do that to be able to get the discounts that are available. These are discounts off of distribution. So whatever your distribution price, you'll get a 16, 20% depending on which tier you're on. And the tiers are very, I would say, they're not very high in terms of qualifications. Qualified sales for silver, which gets you 16% off of distribution pricing, is only $6K in that half year. And then it's $12K in the half year to get to the gold plan. And of course, gold plan is the best plan. It gives you access to a lot of different things, including a sales engineer access that you can call. And of course, you could still call us. You could still contact your sales rep for any information, help with building out a solution to your customer, things like that. Also, level 2 isolation is not available to be managed from the ATP devices. No, okay. So I will check with that too, Martin, because different types of isolation depends on what they define it as. So it depends on usually that layer. There are some functions there that they may need to add, or it needs to be enhanced because a lot of that is just part of the controller engine. All right, so we do have, again, an aggressive partner program. So you want to be able to hit those tiers to get access to those. And of course, we offer free tech support. All of these products are lifetime warranty on the hardware. We have leasing options if you need to. And again, dedicated account manager that you can talk to, call if you have shipping issues, if you're looking to drop ship something because maybe the distributor doesn't have it there at the moment, or we may have it within our warehouse in Anaheim. So we can work out how we can ship it to you or ship it to the customer for installation, things like that. So if there are any other additional questions that I haven't answered, feel free again to use that. Usually I would unmute you, but right now you can just use the Q&A section. I'm trying to get it to a point where everybody starts to get used to and get comfortable with having a headpiece and a mic so that I could unmute you and we could just have a conversation about what's going on live on the webinar. But if not, you can always email me. My email is right there, tri@zyxel.com. Next week will be part 2 on the picking up the ATP. Seth says he's not seeing the webinar next week. I will check with our support team, or sorry, our marketing team, because they have it all set up in my Zoom account, so they're all there. Maybe they just haven't advertised it because it actually is already there on my list. Maybe it's just not listed on that webinar list, but I will check with them. So after this webinar, I will make sure that that's there. And you can check that probably tomorrow or later today to get that signed up for that. But then on the 22nd, we were talking about wireless 101, and then 24th, we're doing a Nebula webinar with Sean. So again, if you don't have any other questions, again, appreciate your time, appreciate the fact that you are choosing ZYXEL, or at least interested in ZYXEL. And many of you here, I know I've talked to before. And thank you for being a ZYXEL partner. We look forward to being your networking ally. And hopefully you can call us. Again, reach out to us. Let us help you with any solutions you need, questions that you have. We're here to try to, make the product better, make it work better for you as well. So thank you for your time. Have a great rest of your day, afternoon, or whatever it may be. Have a good day. And thank you for choosing ZYXEL.